Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hello and welcome back to Joe on Joe. It is me, your host, Joe Slepsky. And this is the massive, oversized 100th issue of GIJOE Real American Hero. It is not an anniversary of this podcast. I know a lot of people track that and they're like, this is our 300th episode. This is our blankety blank. By my rough count, this is about my 231st episode. And I don't even think that's right because that's not counting all of the Joe and Joe Illustrateds that I did that are exclusive on the GIJOE Patreon. So I think I'm well over 300 podcasts. But this is the 100th issue of GIJOE that we're talking about today, because this is the GIJOE focused podcast where we talk about every episode of the cartoon show. We talk about every issue of the comic book in painstaking detail. And I wouldn't have it any other way. That's why it's called Joe on Joe. What else is there to talk about but that? Well, I'll tell you what else is there to talk about. There is to talk about our wonderful sponsors, the Movie and a Meal podcast.
Listeners, I know what you need in your life. You need more podcasts. And you also love movies. So why not do a podcast that's about not one movie. It's about not two movies. It's about 3 movies and a meal. I'm talking the Movies and a Meal podcast. This show is great. It's brought to you by Keith, Brad, and Ben, and each week they bring a new movie to the table, which they all discuss as a group. And it's not, your highfalutin movies. It's What We Do in the Shadows, The Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer, and Out of Sight. It's Bad Education, Ghostwriter, and A View to a Kill. It's X-Men Last Stand, Queen Sugar, The Mandalorian, and Major League 2. They are a lot of fun to listen to. You guys know Ben. It's our friend Ben Penseriga. He was a guest on Joe and Joe. In fact, Ben was the very first remote guest that I ever had on this podcast, so he's always got a special place in my heart. I'm really digging this. I just started listening to it last week. It is a lot of fun. They bring a guest in. The guest, I listened to their Heathers episode. They were joined by Kelly, and she went in depth on her favorite movie, which was Heathers, and it made me want to go watch Heathers to watch with them. I really dig it. So guys, find them out there at Movies and a Meal, Twitter, Instagram. Their website is moviesandameal.podbean.com. They put out 1 episode a week. Give them a listen, guys. Support them. Let them know Joe on Joe sent you. I don't think you're going to be disappointed. It is quite entertaining. And now back to the show.
Seriously, movies are heating up now. Movie season is back. Now the theaters are reopening. It is a great time to go give them a listen. And frankly, it was a good time to listen to before because, being stuck at home and just being, even if you're not quote unquote stuck at home, let's face facts, we're all still home a lot more. There's still a reluctance to go out and do stuff. So we're all watching a lot of movies, and Movies and a Meal provide a lot of good information. I just saw Bond the other day. Woo! Still sitting with me. Loved it so much. No spoilers here. What else did I see recently? I saw The Jungle Cruise. Did not enjoy that a lot. And I'm looking forward to see Halloween Kills this week. And the thing is, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to see these movies solo because you guys know I don't like to talk a ton about I don't do a lot of personal talk on the show, but I'm going to take a moment to recognize Toilet Teal, my beautiful wife, Rebecca, who you listeners absolutely know because she's been a guest in so many shows. It's been a while since she's been on, but that's because she hates comic books. It's not even a joke. But you guys know Toilet Teal. I think the last time you saw her was at the Snake Eyes premiere. If you were following any of our social media live stream stuff that we were doing that day on Instagram when we met Henry Golding and stuff, Rebecca, aka Toilet Teal, the Cobra cleaning lady, she was with us then, and she has been away from California for the last month. She's been in St. Louis taking care of her stepfather in his final days, and he actually passed last week, and so we want to shout out Stephen Whitlock, my stepfather, my stepfather-in-law, and his daughter Hillary and her partner Rocky, who along with Rebecca just stepped up and really just did it and did all the hard work and did all the heavy lifting and took care of their dad and took care of business. Really, there's a lot to do when you have your elders in that situation, and there's still a lot more to do. So Casa de Joe on Joe is me and my 2 dogs, and we're flying solo, and we'll be flying solo for a few more weeks probably, while Rebecca continues to lock stuff down in St. Louis and take care of business. But the 3 of them just did the Lord's work for real. They were of service. They made Steve's final days just so much better, and just took care of a lot of stuff that not a lot of people would do. Not a lot of people would up on their lives and go live in go live in St. Louis of all places. I'm just kidding to all of our St. Louis listeners. Just up on their lives and do it and drop everything, because it's the thing to do, because no one else is going to do it. So so big shout out. So Toilet-Teal, if you're listening, we salute you. Rocky, Hillary, we need to get you some G.I. Joe code names, some Joe on Joe code names. We salute you. And yeah, so if you're wondering why I've had so much free time watching all kinds of movies, I've been mainlining this week, guys. I was watching V. I'm talking the 1980s V miniseries, and I love it. I haven't watched those in so long. I have the DVDs, and I'm popping them in, and I'm almost through with V: The Final Battle, which is crazy. This is for all you guys my age, which is most of my listeners, we're all old heads. I always when I bought these DVDs years and years ago, and I never got around to watching them, but I was like, I'm proud to have the V collection. I thought it went V, then the TV show, like the actual regular weekly show, and then the one called V: The Final Battle. And nope, it's V, then V: The Final Battle, and then that's a misnomer, because that leads into the TV show. So I'm excited. I'm going to be binging V, the TV show. At this rate, I'll probably be done with 20 hours of that by the time this episode airs, because I got nothing to do but watch movies. I've been binging entire seasons of TV shows like in one day, like one Sunday. I'll just sit down, hit play, and all of a sudden the whole day will go by, and I'm like, yeah, okay, I just watched 14 hours of, that show. Okay, we're good. Anyway, point is, you guys give a big shout out to Toilet-Teal. She's doing the work, and she's keeping, and listen, here's the thing. If any of you listeners are in the St. Louis area, if you've noticed that there are some really, really, really clean toilets in that area, you can thank Toilet-Teal for that, because she hasn't slacked off on her Cobra cleaning lady work. She's been keeping the arch toilets clean out of St. Louis. So with that, we're going to move on to the show. And it's a big show, guys. We're going to probably go a little long today. So if you're listening, I am always cognizant of the time. I do try to keep it under an hour. I know the tighter the better, but a lot of times those you were sayings get a little out of hand, and then I want to give each page the attention it deserves. But this is a giant size issue. This is a double size issue. Now, commentary wise, if we can get into a little bit of a opinion, I don't know that it needed to be. That's right, guys. I typically don't do this. First off, I don't billboard too much of like a review before I go into this stuff, but I will say absolutely it's a great issue and it's really well done and all that stuff. But I don't know that it justified being a double size 100th issue. It feels like a really good 2-issue arc. That's cool. But for me, not enough, not enough. Just not enough goes down in here. That's different, like this seemed very, absolutely well done, but seemed very much par for the course stuff, which is maybe it was a little disappointing to this podcaster, or should I say broadcaster, because this is funny. I was watching a documentary about movies. what was it? Oh, it was the one, it was on Netflix, and it was the one with the new one with Rob Lowe. And I got the biggest kick out of this. They were showing people, and did I talk about this last week? God, so my week's been crazy. My month's been crazy because I've been flying solo. And if I talked about this, I apologize. I have no one here to tell me otherwise. There were people on the show that I know are podcasters, but they weren't referring to them as podcasters. They were like, this guy's an actor, that guy's a this girl's a that woman's a this. This person is a broadcaster. And then when they had radio shows, they would say radio personality. And then when they showed a podcaster, they would just say broadcaster. So I'm a broadcaster. I am apparently no longer wallowing in the ghetto of podcasting. I feel like what that move is, that's the move from calling them comic books to graphic novels. I only read graphic novels. I'm a broadcaster. But you know what? I always read comic books, and I collect comic books, and I have a lot of trade paperbacks, and I have a lot of graphic novels. But the vast majority of the books on my shelf are collected comic books in book form, called trade paperbacks. So you guys know where I'm coming from. I feel like I'm a little stir crazy. It's for me and my dogs just living the life. So much pizza has been eaten this last month, guys. But anyway, let's not wait any longer. Let's get into.
You were saying?
And we're going to talk about comic books that were on the shelf the same month as GIJOE 100. Now, GIJOE 100 is cover dated May of 1990. So that means that's the date they were telling retailers to take it off the shelf. So it actually was on the shelf during January of 1990. So all these books shared shelf space with GIJOE 100, and we're going to talk about them. Amazing Spider-Man 332. This is one of the early Venom appearances. This is especially with Venom, Let There Be Carnage. Oh boy. In the theaters, these books are all heating up in the speculator back issue market. You know, they're just getting a little more valuable. And it's got Venom on the cover, and it's got Eric Larson. If you're interested at all in the Venom and just comics and comic creator rights right now, Google Eric Larson, David Michelini. Google that, because this week has been an exciting week of creators going at it and going at each other, and going at each other quite hard, actually, with David Michelini taking shots at, I wouldn't say he took shots at Todd McFarlane, but taking shots at everyone who solely gives Todd McFarlane credit for creating Venom. And then Eric Larson interjected into the conversation. And certainly he was there, so he's got some inside views. But he interjected and put David Michelini on blast. And they've proceeded to put each other on blast. And it was pretty wild to see these real professionals put each other on blast. With opinions about who owns what, and not owns what, rather, but who creates what, like in the comic book process. How does that work? Like, when there are multiple hands involved, who's the real creator? So if that's something that you've got any interest in, you really should check it out, because they both raise very valid points, I do think. If you want to come down on a hard decision for case by case, that's always up for debate, and I'm not here to have an opinion on it, because it's not my opinion to have. But the debate that they had, I thought, was actually really quite interesting, and this is the kind of thing that interests me. If it doesn't interest you, I don't know why you're listening to this podcast. Anyway, Camp Candy #1. What? That's right. John Candy had a comic book that corresponded with his cartoon, Camp Candy. I don't know that I've ever read these, but I feel like there's one issue that's passed through my hands at one point in my life. I love John Candy. John Candy is a legend, comedy legend, absolutely hilarious, brilliant in everything you've ever seen him in. He makes better. It may not be a great movie, but when he comes on screen, he makes that scene 100% better. If you're not a John Candy fan, you should be. If you're really like, oh, I've heard the name, but I've never. Just seek out John Candy stuff. And I'm talking the supporting roles, and, like in Blues Brothers when he shows up as the parole officer and stuff like that. He's so great. What was it? Summer Rental. John Candy is just the loss of John Candy was just so huge to the comedy that we could have had. But that came out, Camp Candy #1. Where else are we at? Excalibur. They're in the middle of their cross time caper. Fantastic Four 340. This is important because the movie is coming out that deals with the Celestials. The FF are squaring off against some Celestial on the cover. I don't know who that is. They all have weird names. I don't remember which Celestial this was. But they're squaring off against the Celestial on the cover of FF. That's going to come in handy when you see the Eternals next month, and see it you should. Of course, GIJOE 100, but right next to GIJOE 100 is Ghostwriter, Volume 3, Number 1. This book was so huge. Do you guys remember when Ghostwriter number 1 came out? Literally, January of 1990. Do you remember that? This book was, pun intended, the hottest thing going. It was everything, man. Ghostwriter, everyone was talking about how cool Ghostwriter was. And this is after, his old series had been canceled years ago. He was kind of a joke character. He was kind of, written off. He wasn't used in any real good capacity. And they came on and redesigned Ghostwriter and gave him, went from Johnny Blaze to Danny Ketch, gave him a new look, gave him an upgraded, motorcycle, actually made him a different demon even, so that, they were just kind of starting from scratch, if you remember. And Mark Teixeira and Javier Saltares did the artwork on it. And that was just so great and gritty, and it was stuff we weren't seeing. And then what was it, like issue 7 or something? It was real early in the run. They did that glow-in-the-dark skull head, and everyone lost their mind over it. Ghostwriter number 1 was just great, and the story was pretty good. It was pretty entertaining, Yeah, it was good. It was. They gave him the penance stare, which he hadn't had before. So the legacy of Ghostwriter, as much as he was around, he had an 81 issue run, which is no small shakes before this. There is so much of like the concept of Ghostwriter that, like those Nick Cage movies and stuff used, that is owed to this version of Ghostwriter, but they give it to Johnny Blaze. Certainly not the, the stunt driver stuff and circus stuff. That's all Johnny Blaze, but the penance stare and a lot of the spiritual stuff came from this run of Ghostwriter. It's really, really good. So if you've never read that, you should check it out. What else do we got here? Well, let's see here. New Mutants 89. Cable, once again, making a cover appearance. We were a few months removed from getting, Deadpool introduced to the world for the first time. Oh, joy. What if the X-Men... What if Professor X had become the Juggernaut? I remember liking that issue a lot. So instead of when he and his half-brother, Kane Marco, found the Crimson Gem of Satorak, instead of Kane grabbing the gem, what if Xavier had grabbed the gem, and how that would have affected, the origins of the X-Men. So it's pretty great. Jim Lee doing a cover for Wolverine number 24 is dope. That's a good-looking cover. A lot of heavy blacks, just like it's a nice setting. You could tell is immediately in Japan, the claws shining in the darkness. Like that's a classic cover. So that's it for Marvel Comics.
You were saying?
Now we're going to look at DC Comics. Adam Strange Volume 3, or Issue 3. Now, book hasn't come out yet, but little birdie spoiled for me the ending of the current Tom King Adam Strange miniseries, Strange Adventures, which I've been tolerating based on the beautiful artwork, the absolutely stunning artwork on that series. And the story I have not cared about from the start. And I had a little bit of a spoilers how it ends. And I'm just going to say, when I get it, if I read it and it is exactly what I was told, man, that's going to suck. Adam Strange, you deserve better than that. But this series was fun. What else do we got? Batman's still in the middle of dealing with the KG Beast. We've got Emerald Dawn wraps up with Emerald Dawn number 6. Again, I'll say it again. If you're a Green Lantern fan, and this story's long been kind of continuity'd out, but if you're a Green Lantern fan and you like Mark Bright, which, from G.I. Joe, you guys are Mark Bright fans. If if you've never read Emerald Dawn, you really should check it out. It's a lot of fun. I used to draw Green Lanterns based on his version of Green Lantern, like the little stylistic choices that he made. That all came from my love of Mark Bright's drawings of Green Lantern. Really, really good. Let's see. Mr. Miracle, he's got a fun maze cover on the cover. That's cool. I always like Mr. Miracle. I always liked him, even though I had never read the Fourth World stuff. I just liked him as a character because he would show up in, like Justice League and stuff. And then I knew him. He was in the Superpowers toys, so I kind of knew him tangentially from there. And not having read any of the actual Kirby stuff, which is funny. But his costume is just so wonderful. And just conceptually, just a guy, escape artist, modeled after Steranko, of course. But I didn't know that at the time. But he's got such a great costume, and he's just and he had a bright outlook on life. And I've always been a big Mr. Miracle fan. So that's it. I mean, that's it for DC. Everything else is this is kind of a lull. I'll just say bland era for DC. There's such great stuff that's happening though. Like in the 5 Year Later Legion, I could always talk about that. But like the covers are just kind of there, Kevin McGuire is doing the Superboy covers though, and those are always beautiful. But like, there's nothing that's going, that's screaming classic out of this era of DC. And it's been this way for a few months, and hopefully we see him pull it out.
You were saying?
Now, over in the movie theater, if you had told me, if you had made me bet and said, all right, Joe, you're a fan, use the words, you're a fan of the movie Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer. That's a little like, they'll use that, and that'll be court case number one. Like, you said on a podcast once you were a fan of Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer. Did you kill these people? No. But I've enjoyed that movie. I've seen it a couple times. I think it's really well done. It's really just, striking. It's very violent and, disturbing, but it's John McNaughton did it. It's very shockingly well crafted and dark and all that stuff. And if that's what you're looking for, and of course, Michael Rooker is absolutely amazing in it. But if you had told me that movie came out in 1990, I would have lost that bet. That movie feels like 1981. That movie literally feels 10 years older than it is. And it's so lived in, and I'm pretty sure, if I remember, it's they shot in Chicago. I think John McNaughton was a Chicago guy. It's just so lived in and feels so of a time. It feels so 70s cinema that when I saw this pop up as a 1990 film, I was shocked. Shocked by it. And it makes sense, time-wise wise, with Michael Rooker. He's not that old. I mean, he is now, but you know what I'm saying. He hadn't been around that long, but yeah, I was shocked. Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer is great. Very dark though. Not recommended for all listeners of Joe and Joe. But that opened on January 5th. On January 12th, speaking of very dark, Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2. Now this is the one with Viggo Mortensen in it. And actually, a guy that I know out here from via the Golden Apple, the John Carpenter signings we have every year, David Shaw did the screenplay. He's a very cool dude. I always see him every year. He's a really nice guy. He did the screenplay for it. I've seen this. I believe I've enjoyed it. I don't remember what happens with it. I think 2 was the one with Dennis Hopper, and it was a little more comedic. I think this one went a little darker again. But of course, speaking of comedic and speaking of dark and gritty, you don't get any darker and grittier than Ski Patrol. Ski Patrol, 80s, 90s. Oh, Paul Feig is in Ski Patrol. What? Yeah, one of those classic jocks take over the mountain kind of Ski Patrol movies. On the 19th, the movie Tremors with Kevin Bacon and Fred Ward. That Tremors, Michael Gross from Family Ties, came out. Really good movie. There's a reason why they've made like 8 sequels to Tremors, all of them diminishing returns. But the first Tremors is really, 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 really pretty entertaining. Like, it knows what it needs to be, and it certainly does it. And that's kind of it. There's a movie called The Image, which came out of, maybe it looks like it might have been a straight to HBO movie, but January is kind of a quiet month until you get to just straight murder movies. Henry, Leatherface, Tremors. What's Brain Dead? Oh, Brain Dead. I've seen this. Both Bill Pullman and Bill Paxton and George Kennedy, another horror movie. So apparently, back in the day, January was a place where you buried horror movies, or just it was wide open for horror movies. That's really interesting. So there you go. That's it.
You were saying?
Now,
mass is ready.
so here we go. Jumping into this giant 100th issue, giant size 100th issue, with a fabulous Ron Wagner cover of Cobra Commander claiming arms outstretched, nice close up from the waist up. I'm back. And he's in that new darker hued Cobra Commander suit. He looks great. The Cobra in the background seems to be like a production overlay. The Cobra on his hood also seems to be a production overlay, so it feels like Ron Wagner drew it without that Cobra, and then they put it on in post. The belt Cobra is good. The chest Cobra looks good. Yeah, it's interesting because then on the hood Cobra, because maybe they wanted it to pop, or maybe he drew it. Actually, not to say that he did or didn't. Maybe he did draw it, and maybe when he drew it, it was like the red on the black, and it didn't pop as much. So there's this like it gives it this. There's a white background on it, and you guys will know it when you see it. So it gives it an unreality. For me, it breaks the image a little bit. I wish it had the chest, the look of the chest insignia is what I'm saying. Now, stylistically, it works because it makes the Cobra pop. It also works like an Oreo effect with the white Cobra on his belt, the black Cobra on his chest, and the white Cobra on his head. I just ultimately, I'd rather have had it look a little more natural, a little more like it was on the, because I don't think that's how it's if we go inside. Yeah, like when you look inside, the way they're drawing the Cobra sigil, it's just red on blue, red on black. So interesting. I wonder what the story behind that is. And you could tell just the way it's kind of cropped that it definitely it feels definitely like a post addition to it. So interesting. But Ron Wagner and Bob McLeod, and it's a great drawing of him. It really is. And love it. Like it is absolutely a strong issue 100 cover as well, because it's an announcement cover. You'll see that a lot on anniversary covers. Even if you're not familiar with the person, having someone in big size, like in big, taking up a lot of the frame on a cover, announcing that they're returning is a comic tradition of it being an important issue. So it's they've been gone for a while and now they're back. So even if you're not familiar with who Cobra Commander is, although again, if you're listening to this, I don't know why you would not know. But if you're just someone on the shelf, you're someone in the store walking by it on the shelf, you look up and you're looking for something interesting. You see, oh, here's this creepy dude in a hood proclaiming that he's returned, and it's their 100th issue. Let me give that book a shot. So I think it works really well in that.
Yo, Joe!
Seeds of Empire. Script by Larry Hama. Penciled by Mark Bright. Randy Emberlin inks. Rick Parker lettering. Bobby Chase, editor. Bob Sharon coloring. Tom DeFalco, editor-in-chief. And in case you were harboring any misgivings, any concerns, is Cobra Commander a good guy? Has he changed his stripes? Has he seen the light of day? If you were wondering any of this absolutely perfect splash page quells any fears you may have had, any concerns, by Cobra Commander kicking a dog. And it's perfect. I feel terrible for that cute little dog, but it is a perfect way to open this book. He is getting off one of their helicopters with a bunch of CGs behind him, and he says, "Out of my way." He's talking to a dog, and he's kicking said dog out of his way. That is a man on a mission. It's a man who hates dogs. And you've immediately, from a storytelling perspective, that's how we're reviewing this stuff, you've absolutely set the tone. You've said this guy is garbage. I dig Bright's pencils. I all throughout this stuff. I really like the everything about the artwork. But it's a strong splash page.
Yo, Joe!
And we roll into this nice 2-page spread of the occupation of Millville. So if you remember last issue, they left Broca Beach, New Jersey, and they were headed to Millville. And I don't remember if they said what city. It feels like it's Pennsylvania. And actually they talk about it like being in the middle of a bunch of mountains, so cut off, kind of like a little bit like Penn State kind of a thing where I guess, it's like, you're a town in the middle. There's only a couple ways in and a couple ways out. So that's what Millville is all about. And it's Cobra Commander on a microphone with a whole host of different Vipers all over the place, rounding up everybody in the street. And I remember Millville was an American town that was on the verge of economic collapse, depression. Things weren't going very well for them. And Mutt and Junkyard and Spirit had arrived there because Mutt's uncle lived in Millville, so they were going to take some vacation time and go spend some time with him. And they got there, and so we were introduced to Millville last issue, where things weren't really going great for him. So Commander basically says, we're taking over this town, and don't you worry, we're going to take care of you. He says, we're going to bring you new prosperity, new jobs, new industry, new commerce. All this coupled with an end to crime and immorality. Of course, this means it will curtail a few insignificant personal freedoms, but you won't even miss much. So this is what Mutt and Spirit are looking. So this little Yo Joe is actually going to cover the 2-page spread.
Yo, Joe!
And now we're on to page 4, where we've got Mutt, and this is Mutt in his V2 look. So he's got the brown gear on, and he's running on the street with Junkyard. And they're basically trying to stay out of sight of Cobra because, they're just wearing their G.I. Joe outfits. Because their G.I. Joe outfits look kind of like, they look like fancy looking street clothes, really, let's be honest. And Spirit asked the question, why did Cobra pick Millville, of all places, to invade? I don't know that we really get that answer this issue, to be honest. Now, conceptually, we know the answer, and it's for all the things I just talked about, but I don't know that they really specifically say this town is why they're doing it. And this middle panel is actually the thesis for this whole episode. This whole double-sized 100th issue is actually, you could say that it's about the attack on, or the takeover of Millville. You could say that it's about the attack on the pit. You could say a lot of things, but what it is really about, it is about how landlines were sabotageable. And if this had taken place in the era of the cell phone, a lot of this wouldn't have happened, because half of this double size, that's the word we're looking for, issue is dealing with people shutting off communications in both Millville and in Utah. There's a lot of communications that are getting blocked here. And here we're at the telephone, the Millville telephone exchange, and all the Vipers are taking over, and they're blocking all telephone traffic, including computer, fax lines being rerouted. They're all being rerouted through the Cobra telecommunication facilities, and so the telephone is secure.
Yo, Joe!
And the police station is now also secure, because the Vipers have attacked that and basically told all the cops, put your hands up, we're taking over. And the cops all they surrender pretty quick. They say, you've got the firepower, you've got the final word. And so they move all the cops into the jail cells. And a lot of Fred Crimson Guardsmen are taking over for the police, because they're, they got the face. That makes sense to me. If any outside looky-loos come in, you want some handsome Fred looking CG to BS them and on their way. So they're now, all the Freds are now in Millville police cars and police uniforms. So they're going to spread out throughout town.
Yo, Joe!
And on said outskirts of town, we've got blockades and roadblocks being put up. No through traffic. Some guy comes in and says, hey, I have a family in town. And when they hear that, they kidnap that guy and bring him into town. So they're not letting anybody go. And this is the kind of detailing that is appreciated.
Yo, Joe!
As we move to the next page, it's appreciated, but it's also it's also there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of padding on it. You know, what was it, 2 issues ago when Cobra Commander first showed back up and he blew everything up, how fast that one moved. This is kind of the opposite, you know. So in this case, we have double the amount of space, and we actually tell probably half the story that issue told. What was it, issue 98? We probably tell half the story that one told. You know what I mean? So there's a weird economy here of language or of pages that, while I appreciate, because it does give us more time with personalities and stuff, it just feels like an odd choice. Whereas, you know, the last double pager, wasn't that the assault on Springfield? And it was just bam, bam, bam. And this one just feels different for some reason. So, back to the phone problems of Millville. We've got Mutt on the telephone, and there's no line. So that's all been cut. They see some Fang 2 choppers overhead, and Mutt remembers that Uncle Jeff's neighbor was a big ham radio enthusiast. So they're going to try to get out on the ham radio. They're going to try to get a message to GIJOE headquarters. Meanwhile, Cobra Commander is shouting to the crowd, you know, that they have nothing to worry about.
Yo, Joe!
In fact, they have everything to rejoice. There's going to be jobs for everybody, free hospitalization, bonuses, subsidized housing, Cobra daycare. Everybody will be paid in real American dollars. It'll be all off the books. You don't have to pay taxes. Now, this is the kind, it's funny. So, let's address the elephant in the room. It's been a very politicized nation in the last few years. And what's hilarious about this is these are the kind of, some of these plans are the kind of plans that people have been saying the government should be doing, but they're also saying the government, needs to be paying for them. And this is just it's something that we should make happen legitimately. But what Cobra Commander's doing is what some politicians have chosen to do over the last few years, which is simply say, oh, it's going to happen, with absolutely no designs to actually do any of these things. That's what's so great about how they portray Cobra Commander here. Because he's saying all these stuff that everyone, of course you'd want that. And of course we're going to make Millville great again. And this is going to happen, and that's going to happen, and no one's going to pay taxes, and you shouldn't have to pay taxes, and everything we'll live in a cotton candy world of magic and gumdrops. Just give me all the power, and we'll take care of it. Sure, we'll take care of it. And the reality of it is, this is all just to please and placate the angry, the people of Millville who have legitimate gripes and who have legitimate worries and concerns but they see this, this hooded savior, and they're like, yeah, sounds great to me. This is also, from a comic perspective, this is also a very cool insight into how he came up, because remember from when we saw the return issue, he's been doing this crazily for 2 years. That this book has gone 2 years this quickly, but he's been doing this slowly across the country. So this is we're seeing it in action now. Now there's a lot of dudes here, and men and women just basically, it's too good to be true. It can't be worse. And you got one guy screaming, Cobra is a terrorist organization. He says, I'm a veteran. I'm telling you, the Cobra stands for everything that American soldiers have shed their blood to stop. You can't sell out your heritage of freedom for job security and free daycare. And this Cobra Commander says, this lowlife is telling you that I'm un-American? What nerve. He's probably a chronic unemployable with psychotic tendencies. Cobra Commander does not like his soldiers that are unemployed. No, he does not. That's not how he likes his soldiers.
Yo, Joe!
He says he's his American. This is his hug the flag moment. If you guys are paying attention, the Viper, and this is great storytelling. The Vipers literally roll a flag out behind him. So as he's screaming, he's just, I believe in free enterprise. That's the American way. And he turns around and he salutes the flag. This is him hugging the flag. Yeah, this is a great book to read in 2021. And as the guy's trying to point out to the crowd that he's lying, of course, Cobra Commander says, listen, just sign up for our program, file into these trailers. We'll get you your ID cards, no obligations. What do you got to lose? And there's a bunch of trailers set up. There's big power cables set up through them. And all of the citizenry are like, absolutely, we're going to sign up. This is going to be great. Now, we know nothing good is in those trailers.
Yo, Joe!
Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Mutt and Spirit have found, what's his name? Mr. Terrasiano. And they've taken over his ham radio. The ham radio, I love it. And even the ham radio can't get through because the Cobras have one of their condors flying overhead, and they're jamming all of the radio transmissions across all the wavelengths. This is TV, microwave, basically nothing's getting out. So again, more pages dedicated to stopping communications, which is another. Listen, they spent a lot of time on it in this comic book, which I'm like, okay, we're hitting it over the head too much. But it's another sign of if they do, like they don't want free press, they don't want the actual word to get out there. They want to control the narrative that Cobra does.
Yo, Joe!
Actually, it's not the Rebel Rouse. This is actually Mutt's uncle. He works for the power company. And, he works for him? I thought he said he worked for the power company. But he basically says he notices that they've got these huge power lines running into the cabins. Like, what could you possibly be using those for? And the CG says, you're going to go to the front of the line, buddy. And they strap him in, and we see what's happening in these cages. They're all getting put into the brainwave scanners, and they're going to get a version of what happened to Rock and Roll and Clutch quite a few issues back, where they've been brainwashed. And speaking of them, this is the perfect time to check in on them. Now, this is really, really, really fantastic storytelling from Larry's perspective as far as pacing goes, because he has set up the problem, set up the action, and he's shown the brainwashing at play on other people, and then now we're going to see it at work with the guys that we know have been brainwashed. So it's really great. Like, I love that he didn't foreshadow. I mean, I guess that's the foreshadowing, but he set it up by just, now we're going right to Clutch and Rock and Roll. Now, remember last issue we were introduced to, what are their names? Tiff and Roxy, who were out looking for UFOs, and they found the Joes who were doing nighttime exercises. So they basically discovered the pit, and Lady J and Flint brought them into the pit so that they don't get run over by all these vehicles, because they're just young girls, being UFO hunters. So they're trying to reach their parents, but they can't reach their parents. So Jay and Flint are going to drive into town and call the parents from the gas station, because she can't get any outside line, which is really weird and frankly disturbing for a $1 billion military installation. They can't get an outside line, and the only person that notices it is Lady J. I feel like Breaker, Mainframe, any one of the communications guys should immediately be a little worried that they've lost communication with the outside world. Anyway, Flint and Jay are going to jump on a Silver Mirage and roll on out to town to see if they can talk to Tiff. Now, Tiff and Roxy are teenagers And it gets a little awkward on this next page, which is hilarious though. I think it's charmingly written, and it's written just right. Before we get there though, we reestablish that they're giant science fiction geeks. There's a nice use of shadows and light on this page too, and it's really not necessary. Like the way that Bright kind of gives depth to these pictures is really, really great. So if real quick, if you look at this top one, he layers it between what Clutch and Rock are doing, Jay and Flint in the middle, and they're the focus of the page, and goes out of his way to give us a third layer, which is Dusty, and I think that's Dusty and somebody else, but they're doing some work behind them even. So it's just giving this depth of field to these images. Then you get to the middle image, and you give this in shadow foreground of the girls, Tiff and Roxy, and that's kind of a quasi introduction to their close up, which is the final panel. And then you end it with this nice depth of field with the camera mounted on it's either an elevator going straight up or it's a ramp going up. And I think it's actually a ramp because the camera is flat to the ramp ground, putting the floor at like a 45-degree angle. So it looks like they're going off into the distance. It's a very subtle, very well-crafted piece of perspective that Mark Bright drew in that. And he puts the Silver Mirage with Flint and Jay in it. He puts that all in silhouette. And it's easy to see what they're doing. It's easy to see that it's a Silver Mirage. Jay's hair looks great, like, in this silhouette, and Flint's beret is clear. It's this whole page is really, really well drawn.
Yo, Joe!
Now this is the page that gets a little awkward. Because remember, Rock and Clutch, they're grown-ass men. Don't go any further because the Chaotix World Tour, 1987 World Tour, that was Larry Hama's band. So that was worked into the artwork. That's really cool. That was the band that Larry Hama played in. I think they still play. So that's a fun reference. And Tiff and Roxy come out and they're like, hey, what'd the guy say? The guy said, I don't happen to have a dollhouse and play tea set in my locker. And this is Rock and Roll said because he was upset. And the girls were like, hey, we're almost 14. And it just gets, let's put it this way. These guys are dopes when it comes to taking care of kids. They're kind-hearted, and none of this, I genuinely don't think, I think this is all fun banter. But to have a grown man say, I don't suppose you want to come down to the motor pool and help us lube some steering knuckles. That sounds hilarious to me. That is absolutely hilarious because that's what Clutch thinks is okay to say. Like one, that they'd actually be interested in doing it. And two, the double entendre of it all, it sounds wild. And then, of course, real talk, the girls aren't interested in that. Like, they don't even know what that is, except for, I don't know if that's Tiff or Roxy. Let's see, Roxy. That's Roxy. The one in the hat is Roxy. I think she's got a crush on Clutch because she says, it doesn't sound that bad. Is that something you really want to do? And then Tiff says, he's way too old for you, Roxy, even if he's kind of cute, which is all creepy because they're 13, they're 13. So it's both charming and creepy. And by making them 13, I think that's better than if you made them, like, let's say 17. Because then that's like, well, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, I don't want to go too far down that route. But there's just there's an awkwardness to this page that is legendary.
Yo, Joe!
Meanwhile, on the surface, we see that Dusty and Muskrat, and that's who it was, I think, with them in the background. They were heading up. They're like kind of on patrol in the deserts of Utah. And while they see Jay and Flint driving off in the distance, Dusty's like, no. He noticed another column of smoke that Muskrat wasn't even paying attention to. And it's making a beeline for the pit. So he asks Steamroller to bounce some radar off it.
Yo, Joe!
Steamroller basically says there's nothing there. But Dusty, because Dusty's a professional, he says machines can be fooled. I know what I'm looking at. And he wakes up a wild card, and they're going to get the mean dog ready to rock and roll because there's something out there, in his words, tracking up my nice clean desert. That's the kind of dialogue that I absolutely adore. This ownership of the desert that Hama gives Dusty and stuff. Like he'd give it to was it Rakondo? I think, yeah, Rakondo, when he's talking about like trampling through my jungle. Like they're like, these guys are so, that's their environment. That's what they do. And I love Dusty. I love Dusty as a figure. So to see Dusty in play here is awesome. And that kind of ownership, I think, is cool.
Yo, Joe!
And we see that the source of the dust cloud is a pythonized stun. And it's got Zarana in it, along with a couple of vipers who they themselves are pythonized. Now, Zarana is not pythonized. That's important as the story progresses. Now, above them is that pythonized conquest. Now, remember, if they're pythonized, they're not going to be picked up on any radar. So the conquest is jamming all the comms, which doesn't make any sense as to how he would have jammed landlines, because landlines are literally landlines. That was the point of a landline phone. So I don't know how they're able to block the phone without like doing what Cobra did, which was go to the, over in Millville, which was go to the, telephone operator and basically lock it down. I don't understand how they're doing it, but they're doing it. And that's why Lady J and Flint had to go into town. So Zarana's plan here is she needs to get close enough to activate these little beepers, like rage inducers that they implanted into Clutch and Rock and Roll. And remember, they kind of implanted those. It's kind of a retcon. So when they had them, nothing was said about implanting these like tracking control chips when they brainwashed them. It was just that they brainwashed them, and now they've got tracking chips in them, and now they're going to flip the switch, but they have to get close enough. I'm fine with all that. It's just these were reveals that were done in order to make this part of the story work. This wasn't anything that was foreshadowed, when they were first kidnapped.
Yo, Joe!
But the mean dog is heading towards that dust cloud, so they've got to check that out. So now down in the pit, Rock and Roll is proudly showing off, and this is pretty funny. He thinks these young teen girls would be interested in looking at a room full of guns. They don't care, and that's absolutely hilarious. Roxy says that, why in the world did he think that we would be interested in a room full of guns? And, Rock is undaunted. He's like, you're science fiction fans, right? Think about what Ridley. And again, they got are they trying to, is that supposed to be hold on, I'm going to look a little closer here. Nope. Ridley. They did it 2 issues in a row. Instead of saying Ripley, they're saying Ridley. And he says, think about what Ridley could have done to the brood mother if she had one of these babies. So I wonder if that was on purpose, if they purposely said don't use Ripley because of copyright stuff, Dark Horse would have been publishing Aliens at the time, or would have just been started publishing Aliens at the time, to be honest. So it genuinely might be, someone might have said, maybe don't actually name check Ripley, because that would have been actual direct competition to Marvel in Dark Horse Comics. I don't think the objection would have been to the movie, because it was owned, Marvel wasn't owned by any other movie company. Maybe that was actually done on purpose. That's interesting. I'd love to find that out.
Yo, Joe!
Meanwhile, at this gas station on the outskirts of town, Lady J says, Old Lou usually comes out when he hears them coming down the road, and old Lou's been trussed up by Zarana as they made their way into town. Now, okay. So, and that's probably so Lou wouldn't rat them out if he saw them driving down the street, because old Lou probably has a direct line to the pit. So, Jay tries to get on the horn or on the walkie-talkie, and she says that all the airwaves are being jammed, and that's from that Conquest X-30. So again, more hot communication talk.
Yo, Joe!
So, Dusty, and this is with Wildcard, and they're in the Mean Dog and Muskrat. They actually see with their eyes. They see a Cobra Sun with those new Python markings. Now, Flint reported seeing them back in issue 88, so 12 issues earlier. So basically, that Pythonizing is going to not allow the Joes to get any vehicular lock on them with any kind of machines. So they're going to have to do it the old-fashioned way and shoot them by sight. Zarana feels she's close enough to the pit, so she better hit that ultrasonic frequency. And we see this yellow concentric circle animation start emanating from the one panel. It shows up in the second panel where it's Clutch and Rock and Roll, and then you get this third panel, which is great, where they both turn their heads kind of mischievously. It's hard to tell with Rock because he's got the beard on. And I wish, yeah, I feel like their turn to the girls, I don't know. There's something about their faces that just seems too normal to me. Like, I feel like I want a little more sinister. I feel like I want a little more, Venom smiling in the dark at the end of, 299? When he was first meeting Spider-Man for the first time. I feel like there's something like that. Like, I want a little more sinister out of that last photo, the last drawing.
Yo, Joe!
Still amazing. Don't get me wrong. Really, the level of detail that Mark Bright gives to these vehicles is beyond insane. These are so toy specific that everyone looks great. I genuinely adore Bright's pencils on all of his G.I. Joe stuff. So, any commentary like that, as far as like what I'd want that's because he does it so well. Like, let's go for a little bit of a different, let's do a second take on that, because I know he's going to knock it out of the park. The Stun does a 180 and starts shooting at them because now that they know that she's activated the the ultrasonic, they can get out of here. They don't have to stick around because that's really what they're there to do. They're there to activate the moles. So now they're trying to get away. Wildcard has broken the radio, so they can't call the pit, but it doesn't matter because their stuff's getting jammed anyway. But again, even more hot communication talk. So we do learn, though, from the Televiper that there is one narrow band frequency left open. Or actually, that's from Zarana. She says to get on it and call in some air support. But if the Conquest comes in to provide strafing, then they're going to lose their air jamming cover. More communication talk.
Yo, Joe!
Clutch has, and Rock and Roll, they have their guns drawn on the two girls. And these girls are frightened out of their minds. And, joke's over, and it wasn't very funny. How's about we go knuckle those steering lubes or whatever you wanted to do before? How about that? I mean, it's funny. Like, it's funny. Stop pointing those things at us. It's too creepy for words. Now this is a great face. This second panel. There's only 3 panels on this page. Really well drawn. I love this page because it's concise. It does what it needs to do. You get half a splash showing the peril they're in with the guys holding guns on them and framed really nicely. So you get good flow with Rock and Roll being visible underneath his arm. Gives plenty of room for the dialogue. Doesn't crowd the scene. Then you get a close-up of their faces, and their faces look tormented. Their faces absolutely look like they're struggling. There's sweat on their brow. Their teeth are clenched. Their eyes are wide open, so they don't look like they're happy about doing this. That's a great reaction. That's the kind of reaction that I like, that you want to see in these kind of like brainwash scenarios. And then you get a close-up on the girls, and this is classic horror movie close-up. So they've got their hands clutched, their faces, jaws dropped open, their eyes are wide, and you get the shadow of the guys looming over them. And remember, these girls believe in sci-fi stuff, so they've been taking over. They've been taking over. They're pod people.
Yo, Joe!
And out in the desert, they're shooting at the mean dog, and they're chipping the paint job. So Wildcard's very upset. Nobody gets to wreck his ride but me. That's funny. That's a funny self-aware comment. And they said, and this is cool. One of them says, I actually can't tell if it's Wildcard or Dusty, but they said, "Do you realize where these guys are leading us? Are these Cobras ever going to be in for a surprise?" And there's an awesome surprise that's going to come up in another 2 pages. So this is a nice little foreshadowing there. They're wondering where that conquest is. So now we know when that conquest comes down to strafe, which it does in this middle panel, some of the communication lines should be open now. So they buttoned down into the mean dog, so nobody got hit. But now they can try to get some tracking on them. Except
Yo, Joe!
that pythonizing bounces any radar off, so they can't use that big cannon on top. But they're basically firing like cover fire, so they're throwing off his aim just by kind of shooting in his general direction. But they've got no help from any of the systems. So this is Luke Skywalker turning off his system, but then the Force not responding. And Zarana is very happy about this because she thinks that GIJOE headquarters is in shambles, and she's going to destroy the mean dog as a bonus. I mean, what else is there?
Yo, Joe!
Is a cool drawing on top. So the pilot of the X-30, or the Python Conquest, he's got this heads-up display, and in it he's got Muskrat, and Muskrat's drawn in a pink color hold, so as he's actually an illustration on the heads-up display. And this is, again, before Photoshop, right? So this is done as a color hold, so it's all one color, but just pink, and it's drawn in a way that it's real clear. Oh, that's interesting, though. Yeah, it's interesting. That's actually too bad. The color hold should stop when you look closely on it at the picture. The on the right side, it's the edge of his heads-up display, and those concentric rings should stop on that, but they actually go over it. So there's actually a printing error there. That if you got rid of that, this would be a perfect little fun pre-Photoshop way to represent that. But unfortunately, it is there. But that's what's going on there. It's not some magical. It's funny because pink is used in the X-Men books for telepathic communication stuff, like projections and things like that. So that kind of gives that feeling there as well. But this is where the GIJOE Mobile Command Center was buried in the sand. And this is awesome. It's a nice half-page spread. It pops up out of the sand and fires everything. Just an entire, every cannon, every missile that it has, because it can't track them. And Steamroller says, I always wanted to do this full barrage. He can't miss, and he does not miss. He hits. Some of those missiles make contact with that X-30, and they certainly throw it off aim, so Muskrat lives. But it sends it crippling. It's not knocked out of the sky yet, but it does send it off to lick its wounds a little bit. But that's a fun, pops up out of nowhere like a dune sandworm to get all current.
Yo, Joe!
The mean dog is chasing the pythonized stun. All these verbiages, and they're now saying, "All right, we got to get out of here." So there's a lot going on. This is a lot of like desert ballet dancing here. It's all rendered pretty well, and you can keep track of it pretty well the way Bright is pacing everything, because now the mobile command center is now in the mix too, and it's also going to be chasing that stun, except for that conquest driver pilot rather. Deftly, I'll say, they aim the Python Conquest at the mobile command center, and they use it like a missile. That plane becomes a missile.
Yo, Joe!
And it rams right alongside it. Now this is awesome because it's a huge explosion, obviously. And Steamroller gets out and just says, Well, he blew off one track and he scorched my paint job. In other words, he barely scratched it. However, it was enough to take him out of this specific chase. So it shows you just how massive that mobile command center was. I never had that toy. It's pretty great. I've never been a fan of the aesthetics of it, but when you unpack it and it becomes its own, its own like the mobile command center, it's just such a cool toy. And it's got so much, it's like a Jawa sandcrawler for G.I. Joe. It's got so much cool stuff in it that, that was neat. That's a really cool toy. I wonder how many of you guys out there have yourself a mobile command center. Now, Steamroller though is also quick to point out that that guy hit the command center, but he's got to respect that pilot because it took a lot of guts to stay in that burning plane long enough. It almost makes him feel like he shouldn't stomp his face in, and he's walking towards where the guy's landing in his parachute. So Steamroller's going to go beat the hell out of that pilot.
Yo, Joe!
And to my understanding, if I think about it, I don't think we ever get follow-up. I think that's the last we see of Steamroller and that pilot. So let's assume Steamroller beat the crap out of him, which is great. So now the Joes are gaining on Zarana. The mean dog is, it's on fire, and it's had better days. They were having an engine fire. And as Zarana thinks she's getting away, here comes Lady J and Flint firing that minigun on the Silver Mirage over the butte, or the sand dune. That's pretty great. And they got a Gatling gun trained on them.
Yo, Joe!
And that knocks the stun out of the race. So this is great. And remember, this is all happening at nighttime. And this issue is really played day for night. There's not a ton of shadows. Like, certainly there's dark skies and there's dark colors used to illustrate that they're at night. But you remember, was it just last issue? Yeah, it was just last. Yeah, it was the last issue with Trimpy, where it was really, really heavy nighttime. Like, it was dark, and they really, and I think that level of dealing with the darkness is really hard to do when you're dealing with this level of action. So you need to see all this stuff going on. You need to see we're here to see all these vehicles do it. Whereas last issue was used for mood. It wasn't as much action really as it was a set piece of, the girls thinking they were getting attacked by UFOs and stuff. So they played that up. This is more about, we need to understand what's going on and just remember they're in the dark. So what reminded me actually was in this second panel, the lights from the Silver Mirage brighten up the desert. And so it's really done with the coloring. So what I'm saying is kudos to the colorist on this. They did a fabulous job in this issue. And it's basically playing it day for night. Flint jumps out and Sokka McGee's the stun driver.
Yo, Joe!
And Zarana and this Televiper, this Pythonized Televiper, they seem to have gotten away. And the Televiper says, while the Joes interrogate the stun driver, we can make our way out of here in the dark. And he says, I'll be able to get clean away for sure, since my Pythonized suit is radar invisible. And as he said that, Mark Bright draws Zarana staring at him with a big smile on her face. And you know what's coming. And Larry makes you wait for it. And it's great. So as this is going on, that stun driver they have, and they're beating him up, they're kind of interrogating him real quick. And he quickly gives up that Zarana inserted 2 sleeper agents into the headquarters. They're programmed to go berserk. So Jay realizes she's got to hustle back to the pit, right away, because but now their communications shouldn't still be down. That's the thing. Now that the plane's out of the sky, according to the logic of this, they should be able to call the headquarters.
Yo, Joe!
Meanwhile, in Millville, Cobra's driving around in these Hiss-2 tanks. There's curfews. All the citizens have to stay inside. I imagine a lot of them have been put through the brainwashing so far. And they're driving down the street, and the lights illuminate a body in the road. They assume it's just a drunk. Can never be too careful. But as this Viper gets up close to him, we see...
Yo, Joe!
It's the old surprise drunk move. and it's Mutt. And he jumps up with a bottle and he bashes it across the face of this Viper. And before the other Viper can draw his gun, Junkyard comes out of nowhere and jumps and tears, I'm assuming tears the throat out of that Viper, which is great. And then before the Televiper can do anything, Spirit comes bounding over some boxes or fencing, and he cracks that Televiper in the skull. So now the Hiss Driver, though, there still has to be taken care of. The Hiss Driver, who, this is cool that they've drew this. Normally, I think they used to draw like just the canopies open, but they actually have the Hiss Driver coming in from the bottom, which is really neat.
Yo, Joe!
And Spirit wedges it open, rather, with a piece of wood, so that he grabs that the Hiss Driver and bashes him in just a great piece of animation. The driver breaking his face on the canopy, denting the canopy. That's how hard Spirit pulled him against it. It's great. And Mutt is bashing the face of all these other Vipers, just making sure they have everything under control.
Yo, Joe!
Now, what they happen to have found, though, is this specific Hiss tank is driving around with that rabble-rouser from earlier, the guy that was being like, Cobra's terrorists. He's actually been held here. I'm surprised now maybe they were taking him to kill him and bury him or whatever, but we see that the people of Millville beat him up. And he says then they marched into those trailers, and when they came out, they were different. We got to do something. And so the guys all drive off now in this commandeered Hiss tank, and they say, we will.
Yo, Joe!
Now at the pit, Clutch and Rock and Roll have locked themselves into the armory, and they got the two kids with them. Jay makes sure nobody's just firing willy-nilly. We don't want anybody getting hurt. There still are Joes. Sci-Fi shows up, and this is great. Sci-Fi's got his laser out. I don't know. That's a awesome. It looks awesome. Doesn't look like his toy. Memory serves, but it looks great. And he's got his laser, and he's burning through the hole. Burning a hole through the door, rather. And when they get inside, they give everybody freeze with your hands up.
Yo, Joe!
And it's just the girls in there, and they're just like, don't shoot. We're just girls. And we see that Clutch and Rock were so put out about hurting these girls.
Yo, Joe!
That they're such good dudes that everything broke in their brains, and their eyes rolled back, and they both passed out. So Doc's here to take care of them, just like he proclaimed in the movie. They're going to be okay. Actually, no. He actually brings Psych Out, which is cool to see Psych Out in use here. And Psych Out, as an expert in this stuff, says, I'll venture a guess they both overloaded from the internal conflict between their personal ethics and the Cobra programming. Even with post-hypnotic suggestion, it's almost impossible to force someone to commit an act they wouldn't normally do. It's typical of the criminal mind to believe that all others are just as unprincipled as they are. This is great. I want everyone to read this panel that Psych Out just said. Read it in Adam West's voice. This is something that Batman would have said to Commissioner Gordon in Batman 66.
Yo, Joe!
And out in the desert, they're still trying to find Zarana. Dusty can't find him. He's got one blip, though, and they see, and it's a naked Viper trussed up in his skivvies, tied up. And we see that there it is, Zarana. She stole his pythonized outfit, and she's making good her escape into the desert sky. It's a great, great, great ending to that part of the story.
Yo, Joe!
Now in Millville, they're driving and they're going to see Uncle Jeff, and they're like, all right, well, we got to rescue Uncle Jeff. Junkyard, because he is a dog, he goes after some random cat. I'm assuming the cat has not been Cobra-ized. I think it's hilarious that with all the control that Mutt and Junkyard have, just a random cat does draw him away. I do have a feeling, though, that that's going to come into play next issue, because I think maybe, this is not from memory, but if Junkyard's not there when they draw their weapons on him, Junkyard can then come in and save the day, because they're not expecting him, because he's off chasing this cat. And when he comes back to the house, he'll jump in and save him, because...
Yo,
We see that Uncle Jeff has been totally brainwashed. And he says, that's them, the spies from the G.I. Joe team, take them away. And there's all kinds of Vipers in the house. And they've got their guns trained on the Joes. So the next issue is The New Guard. We're going to see you in 30. Got a few postbox from the pits. We've got letters from David A. Tumarkin from Brandeis University out of Waltham, Massachusetts. I've been to Waltham. We got Mark Bosley out of Stone Mountain, Georgia. I've been to Stone Mountain. Hold on a second. Did I write all these? Wait a minute. And this is interesting. Actually, this is interesting to a conversation I was having earlier with, friend of the show and friend Dave Amiot, talking about Larry Hama and using like some of the classics versus using some of the newer guys. And this is a real telling piece. The guy was talking about all kinds of stuff, but he was asking about, the introduction of some of the newer elements of G.I. Joe. And Larry says, here's the inside track. Once upon a time, there were TV commercials for G.I. Joe comics. They were generated by an ad agency at the clip of about 4 per year. Whatever was shown in the commercial had to be in the comic book. So I got stuck with Serpentor, Tomax, Zaymot, and a host of silly characters. I did my best to make them work because it was a matter of doing the job. If you have a squad of losers, you still have to go out on patrol. I drew the line at Cobra and a few others. There are no plans for future commercials. Now let's unpack that, everybody. He's saying a lot without saying a lot. He's saying he doesn't like all those characters. Specifically the ones he names, I think. But also you could probably imagine a few others that were introduced during that time. Because he also says a host of silly characters. Calls them losers. And then, also we learned that it was his call to never use Cobra Law, which I think is strong. And then he also just says, there are no plans for future commercials. Meaning, he must have drawn a line in the sand, and some of that editorial, Hasbro editorial control apparently has gone away. So is it fully gone away, or because how much are they going to be dictating who he uses for the next, what was it, 52 issues? So we're going to see. That's a lot though. That's a really strong, quick little insight there into his frame of mind. And this is exactly the stuff we were talking about earlier before I even read this. So that's crazy. So there you go, guys. That's G.I. Joe number 100. Man, do I appreciate you all sticking with me. I know we went a little long today, but it's a double-sized issue. I hope you agree with me. Or actually, I'm sorry. I don't hope you agree with me, but I hope you see where I'm coming from with. It's weird. It's a 100-sided issue, and there's certainly a lot of action in it. And it gave room to breathe, and it gave room for character. It certainly gave room for multiple pages of communication talk. But ultimately, it's still a 3-tiered story, a 3-channel story, an A, a B, and a C. And they keep flipping back between them, and it's just an action and a chase, and an action and a chase. And there's no, we didn't get there wasn't resolution on Millville. Clutch and Rock, while we had activation of their controlling, there's no resolution on it. It's not like they did anything. They were able to beat it. I don't know. It's weird. It's not like the assault on the pit amounted to anything. There's just a strange sense of unimportance to this issue, even though it proclaims how important it is. And it's good. It's well done. Don't get me wrong. It is really well paced. It doesn't feel long. It just doesn't feel special. So I still love it though, and I love you guys, and I appreciate you listening, and I appreciate you being you. So now you Joe, and Joeing is half the battle.